Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Day After Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That is the usual crew. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples. We're here to talk North Carolina 35, Florida State 11. Buck, a lot to get to here, so I'm going to let you open the door, and we shall proceed to run through it and talk about Carolina's big win in Tallahassee.
Well, we knew going in that Florida State was not the most potent offense on the East Coast.
You can get me laughing. You can get me laughing right off the bat.
Well, I mean, it's true. I'm not, exaggerating here. Since they have a difficult time scoring against air, holding them to 11 points, so it was their low point of the year. So that's something for the Tar Heels. The title that Tommy chose for this, without my consultation at all, we didn't collaborate on the issue about Carolina Bullies, Florida State. The how you kind of measure that in these circumstances is, did they bully them as bad as anybody else did they've played this year, right? I mean, that's how you have to measure it. And by just about every statistical account, Carolina gave Florida State just as good a beating as they've gotten the entire year. So from that standpoint, we can take a little bit away from this game, even given the circumstances as they are in Florida State, which Jason knows much more about than I do. But there were times where they just didn't look like they wanted to be there, Florida State. And there are other times you could see effort being made, but they're not playing inspired football right now, we'll put it that way.
Jason, one thing we talked about going into this one, and we have all year, is that Florida State tended to play hard even if they weren't playing well. I didn't see a lot of that yesterday, especially from number one. That guy could have done more from the stands or from the beach than what I saw from him. But when you're 1-8, now 1-8, it's tough to play hard. I was impressed how Carolina made sure, except for that opening drive and opening drives of the second half, made sure that Florida State didn't have any reason to really try. What'd you see?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a team in terms of Florida State. I saw a team that, kind of gave initial resistance, and then once Carolina scored 14, I thought I saw some guys quit. And that was really the first time this year that I've felt that, at least defensively, I mean, the effort has been spotty at times, but this was the first game where I felt like there were several pockets of that team that basically quit, that they decided, yeah, this ain't for me. And you could definitely see it with Shaheem Brown. You mentioned number one, the safety there. He made some business decisions, and he's been making a lot of bad business decisions all year. Going all the way back to the offseason when he was going, he got a 1-game suspension for driving 117 miles an hour in a 70. So, I mean, I presume that what he was doing was trying to audition for going to Georgia next year, but you ain't going to play at Georgia with the kind of play that he's put on the field this year. And you could see by about the middle of the second quarter, he and a couple other guys, they wanted no part of tackling Omarion Hampton in the open field. I mean, that was just, it was obvious. And you could see some of those guys were just like, nah, not today. And when you get a team in that situation, then it's time to apply strap to seat, as it were, and that's what Carolina did. And they came through 500 yards total, 500 total yards offensively, 201 yards given up. That is a thrashing, right? And it's even more of a thrashing when 289 of those yards are on the ground. Right, that is an old-fashioned line of scrimmage game beatdown on both sides of the ball. When you got 7 sacks and rush for 289 yards on your opponent, and your opponent is held under total yards or under your rushing yard total, that's getting the job done.
But Omarion Hampton, I mean, we have that portion of the program every week, it seems like. And it's funny, when we did the over-under show, we had it set at 1,500, and we all kind of said, there's no way he's going to get 1,500 being top of the scouting report. Man, he continues to – I think he had
that boy good.
He had 172 yesterday on the ground, 126 of them or something in some change after contact. But we've seen a lot of good running backs at North Carolina. He's certainly in that top tier and continues to prove it every week.
Yeah, it's a shame he's having a year like this with Carolina football in the circumstances it's in, and it's a lot of its fans and supporters have tuned out this entire season because of the way it just unfolded early. That's a shame because you're not going to be able to see his like again anytime soon in Chapel Hill. And, he had 32 carries yesterday, and I think one of his last carries was the 49-yard scamper on the shovel pass. He outran the entire FSU defense then, and he'd had 31 carries under his belt. That just kind of describes the kind of beast that he is. And beast mode gets overworked as a term ever since Marshawn Lynch stepped down from the NFL. But Hampton deserved that term yesterday. He just every piece of his game just came together. And what's fascinating is the reserve running backs. I finally got a look at why Jason liked Darwin Barlow so well. He's got some skill.
That's a player.
He's got some skills, and Davion Goss certainly has some skills. Well, they rushed the ball 55 times, and Hampton got 32 of those carries. So, he certainly got his share of the workload, but it wasn't exclusive. So we'll just have to take that and appreciate it and stick it on our walls in our bedrooms and look at it, and from now on. But
I do wish he hadn't. I do wish he hadn't gotten 32 carries. I mean, that was the big thing that I felt coming into the season. 1,500 yards, okay, but how many times are they going to have to run him to get there? And I didn't think they'd be willing, especially. I mean, we kind of expected Darwin Barlow to be healthier in this year, and I figured they'd share the load a little bit, but they've just given him every meaningful carry, and that's something I'm honestly not a big fan of. But I mean, it's hard to argue with the constant success that you get from it, but I'm just thinking in terms of Hampton's future. I'd like to see him more at the 20 carry range than the 32 carry range, especially when once they hit 14 points. I was sitting in my house going, well, this game's over. And he was probably at 15, 16 carries there. And once they hit 21, I mean, obviously, Florida State's not scoring 21. And, I mean, I would like to see them share the load a little bit more down the stretch when they do get leads. But it's, again, I understand it. You got a really fun toy to play with, and it's hard to put that back in the cabinet and get something else out.
I suspect that toy is also banging the table.
Oh, he wants to carry the ball.
He wants to play. He wants to carry the ball, and so it's got to be hard to say no.
Yep.
To Omarion at this point of his career, it's just hard to do.
He's got 3 games left: Wake, BC, and NC State. He's like 1172 right now. See where he ends up. I have a feeling our over/under.
He's going to go over. If he stays healthy,
our
the next
initial
3 games.
over/under was accurate, and we should have all taken the over. Jason, one thing about the running game, and we can talk about this, is the offensive line's healthy, or relatively healthy, as it always has been. And we've talked about PFF grades all the time, and I understand they're flawed in some sense. But when I'm looking at it today, I'm looking at it right here, North Carolina's offensive grades. Austin Blaskey's number 1. Aiden Banfield's number 2. Howard Sampson's number 3. Willie Lampkin, who's always first or been first a lot, is 4th. And that's overall. Not until you get to 5 do you see somebody not on the offensive line in Carolina's offensive grades. That's growth. And that bodes well for these, especially for these last 3 games, with what we've talked about with Hampton, Barlow, and Goss. What have you seen from them that has sort of improved there?
Well, the biggest thing, the biggest thing that changed in this one is that they were not asked to pass block very much. If you look at their pass block grades, Blasky was at 52, Banfield was at 50, Sampson was at 51, Trevion Green was at 43. So if they're asked to pass block a bunch, those overall grades are going to go down significantly. But in this game, they had 40, 41 run block snaps and 26 pass block snaps. And those run block numbers were 73.9, 78.2, 77.2, 71.7. There's your real difference. If you can bully teams in the run game with that big offensive line and with Hampton, the growth is you don't have to do what you're not as good at. Because they flat out aren't as good, especially at tackle. I mean, you can see that. At tackle, they're just not as good blocking against the pass. And they did give up some interior pressure here and there as well, but that's the strength of that Florida State defense is those 2 defensive tackles. And you could see that when they ran on the interior. When they tried to go A-gap runs down in the goal line and all that, those guys, flexed. They were, Florida State's defensive tackles are going to be playing on Sundays for a reason. But as soon as they started going after those defensive ends, well, things change real quick. Those defensive ends didn't hold up against Carolina's size at the offensive tackle spot, and then you add Hampton to that, and Florida State's back 7 didn't want to tackle him. So I'm not yet ready to declare that there's been major progress in terms of, okay, the PFF grades are just getting a lot better. I think it's just a matter of they played a Florida State team that didn't put any pressure on them to have to throw the football to win the game. There's very little need. They had to a few times as part of drives, but you look at the final drive. I mean, this is up on my in the numbers. The final drive Carolina had 9 plays, 53 yards, burned 6:28 time of possession, and those 9 plays for 53 yards were 9 carries for 53 yards, 0 pass attempts. That's your growth, is that I do think they've gelled a good bit as a run blocking line, and that has improved. That has continued to get better from day one, but they were already pretty good there last year. But we talked in the offseason, they were trying to build a bully, to play bully ball this year, to basically batter teams and be a battering ram in the run game, and that was what they were going to commit to being good at. That was going to be the identity on the offensive side of this is not going to be a finesse football team. This is going to be a team that's going to line up and play, smash mouth football. And that's what they've been. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to regular listener Thomas Thurman. I got a question from him this morning saying, does the fact that North Carolina had 3 times as many carries as passes yesterday mean that we are automatically promoted to the Big Ten next season? I mean, I can't confirm that that's actually true, but I do believe that there's probably something in the NCAA bylaws about this. So, Carolina, maybe that's the best thing they can do for making themselves appealing to the Big Ten Conference.
Well, I was watching Washington and Southern Cal play in the Big Ten. At the same time, I was watching Pitt and SMU play in the ACC. So it's crazier things can happen. Buck, last really comment for me on the offense is I was listening to Mack Brown after on the post game after Carolina's win, and he talked about, if I was a wide receiver, I wouldn't like it too much that they only threw it 3 times in the second half, but you get the win. But saying that, Criswell had a great day, 13 for 17. But if we look at the targets and catch numbers that we've looked at more than once this season, John Copenhaver had the best day with 4 catches. He had an 80% catch on his targets, but everybody else was 100%. This unit, though limited attempts, did their job as well. And I think, and you splash in, Paul Billups, Christian Hamilton, Jake Johnson getting some action. I mean, they're starting to spread it around even without Nesbitt out there and Copenhaver leading the way.
You stole a little of my thunder there because I talk about this a little bit in my article today. The thing about this performance on the passing side of the equation, throwing the ball, which they only tried 18 times or 17 times and didn't have to try that many, is that passing performance was made possible by the fact that they ran the ball so well. They just did not have to lean on the passing game. And as y'all were talking about on the game plan podcast, Jason brought up that Florida State in run defense gave up a lot of yardage on first down. That's where they tended to get gashed, was giving up yards on first down. I haven't seen the numbers, I didn't look at it, but I think that was probably the case yesterday. And so they didn't have that many third and long plays to make. But all of that taken into consideration, you take all that into consideration, that was a highly efficient performance by Criswell and passing game. You already talked about the targets that I guess 6 of the 7 receivers on the team had a 100% catch rate. And the completion percentage was way outside the norm for Criswell. He completed nearly 75% of his passes. And I'll take a look at this every week as far as big plays goes. They had 13 completions in the passing game. Of those completions, 7 of them went for more than 15 yards. So when you're getting that kind of efficiency out of your passing game, it certainly augments everything you're trying to do, and it was helped greatly by 50 yards of it coming from that shovel pass to Hampton, which basically should have gone nowhere, went to the house. You just have to admire the fact that he's not throwing any interceptions. Last interceptions he threw were at Duke. 4 games in a row, he hasn't thrown a pick. He's not fumbling the ball, which was a problem for him earlier in the year. He's getting rid of it. He's not taking any sacks. He took 1 sack in this game. So he is being a highly efficient part of an offense where the passing attack is secondary to the running game. He's being so highly efficient, particularly in the last 4 games, that it's actually a joy to watch the efficiency that the passing offense is operating at.
And they were smart in how they attacked that Florida State defense as well, because the outside corners and just the corners in general are the strength of that, really the strength of that defense, along with those defensive tackles. And you look at the numbers and you look at where they attacked. They didn't go after those guys. They ran, Y cross, where you've got Kobe Paysor on a crossing route going all the way across the field and just running away from coverage, knowing that Florida State plays a lot of match coverage stuff. And then Copenhaver, of course, with 4 catches, going after a little bit of linebackers and some of the safeties there. That was smart. I mean, you and Jake Johnson. I mean, you look at the top pass catchers in this game: John Copenhaver, Omarion Hampton, Kobe Paysor, and Jake Johnson was the bulk of your offense. Christian Hamilton 1 catch, Paul Billups 1 catch, none for J.J. Jones. They were smart. They really did understand where the strengths of that defense are and where that defense has some issues. And they attacked the linebackers, they attacked the safeties a little bit, and they really pushed going across the field on some of those crossing routes to run away from single coverage. And that's stuff that Criswell throws well. That's stuff that Carolina runs well, and it worked really well against what they faced. So also a hat tip to Chip and the offensive staff for understanding what they were facing and not playing into Florida State's strength.
Yeah, and I agree with the tip to Lindsey there. I asked him on Monday before this game how Criswell has improved, and it felt like to me that, he had better protection in front of him with the guard and center, but he also learned to step up and not back into those sacks. He did it one time yesterday, but the way he was able to – I was surprised he only had 18 yards total rushing because it felt like more than that, because he was able to step in and then slide out of the side door rather than the back door of the pocket and make plays. But you guys are right. It's a combination of Criswell getting better. It's a combination of guys making contested catches. I mean, Pacor makes contested catch. Copenhaver makes that catch on the side over there where he just snags it out of the air. And I'd be lying if I didn't immediately think of the Georgia Tech game because that's how my negative brain works sometimes. But he made that, and then Omarion just gives you a check down and takes it to the house. I think we've covered the offense here. I'm going to talk about Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. East Franklin Street and online. Carolina basketball season starts tomorrow night, and if you don't have your Carolina swag, you need to go to Johnny T-Shirt and get it. They've got all the jerseys. They've got everything you could possibly need. And I'm going to tell you, the white throwbacks. Buck, I don't know about you, and Jason, I don't know if you care, but I love the white throwbacks, man. That reminds me of the Smash Mouth bully ball days that Carolina had over the years. They looked awfully good. Johnny T-Shirts got them. You can get everything you want there. Great customer service. And, of course, if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, you get 10%. Just tell them IC sent you, give them the code, and it's a free 10% off your order, either online or in person. National guys pay the bills. Carolina 35, Florida State 11. All right, Buck, I won't steal your column this time, and I'll freely admit I read it before we did this, so I might have stole that point earlier. No, I had it too. We think the same.
There you go.
Defense. I asked Collins last week, is it really Kamen Rucker? Is it really Kamen Rucker that makes this team this much better on defense? And he talked about how he's a really good player. And I agree that one player can make a difference. But, Buck, this difference, it just seems like the entire defense is playing on a different level than they did before that first bye.
Well, I don't know. You could approach this from several different ways. For example, we had a serious discussion on one of these shows earlier this year about whether or not Jeff Collins was handcuffed to some extent by his personnel options and not being able to be the minister of mayhem that is his calling card, that he had really not been as aggressive as we expected him to be. But these last two games, he's been the epitome of aggressive. And, when something like that happens, when you have that type of coincidence, Rucker comes back and immediately the defense improves, you have to be suspicious that that's a coincidence, right? I mean, you have to kind of examine whether or not that's actually the truth. But Rucker probably gave Collins enough of an extra weapon so that he could engage in more aggressive play calling, that enabled him to be more aggressive in play calling, which benefited everybody from a sack, tackle for loss, interception, all of that statistical category improved across the board for multiple people, perhaps because he had the option of being more aggressive on defense. Is that all of it? I don't think so. I think that people have gotten better. They've gotten more experience. Guys like Caleb Cost have gotten more experience. I think Huzzy is acclimated himself back to the corner role that he had when in year one when he was here for play corner for a little part of the year. So all those things I think come into play, but I don't think we can lay it entirely at one player's feet. But we can certainly acknowledge the fact that the defense immediately got better with Rucker in the game.
Yeah, Carolina's best performance is Minnesota, who is a good football team, has continued to show that they're a good football team. Virginia and Florida State, Rucker completely healthy in all three. Jason, what's the difference here if it's not just Rucker? Unless, I mean, Amari Campbell had great. Bo Atkinson was, looking like I saw somebody on one of the threads say Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, the dude was everywhere. And, Will Hardy's healthy. And you got that was a nice interception he had. It was a drop from Florida State, but at least he caught it. I wasn't going to mention too many drops.
Hey, look.
But it was still a good catch for Hardy.
I told you, look, what did I tell you in the game plan podcast? If Florida State has a receiver that's got a chance to make a play, that ball's hitting the ground. Well, in this case, it hit the ground just a tiny bit, but it was in the arms of the North Carolina safety.
When you look at this defense, Rucker clearly, his PFF grades this week, 88.8, and then Amari Campbell, 84, and Bo Atkinson, 83.6. In your eyes, what's been the difference? Granted, Florida State's offense is not good, but that has not mattered this year for Carolina's defense. But now they're coming.
Yeah, but they haven't played anybody that's that not good. I mean, Florida State wishes they had the 2018 Nathan Elliott offense.
That's kind of scary.
Wow.
Oh, I'm serious, and I am serious. That 2018 Nathan Elliott offense is a lot better than this Florida State offense. A lot.
They have put up remarkably poor stats. I just hard to believe some of the numbers they're putting up offensively.
It's insane. And so part of this, I have to lead with this. Part of this, at least in this game, is just a matter of, like if you're a grown man and you're, let's say fighting a 10-year-old, you could take that 10-year-old's hands and arms and just go, "Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself?" Right? Some of it is just that in this game, that essentially North Carolina could be the bully because they actually are playing a team offensively that's actually that bad, that's that toothless in terms of capacity to do much. And in terms of just overall coordination of what they're doing and ability to do things that are simple, like block. And we saw that. You saw that in a couple cases where, Carolina ran a routine end tackle stunt, and both of them got through because of such horrendous technique that on the one hand, you want to tip your cap and go, okay, that was a good stunt, well called, and the defensive line did their jobs. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, but if you're going to play against somebody that's going to use that bad a technique, you better get there. So some of it was that, but the thing is, this is now a 3-week trend. So it's not just that. What we saw in terms of 7 sacks yesterday, 10 sacks 2 weeks ago, a lot of that is just 2 bad offensive lines. A lot of it. But that isn't all of it. What you're looking at is a healthy Atkinson opposite a healthy Rucker with some guys inside that are also pushing the pocket, and those guys are eating. Those are guys that are going to play on. I mentioned the 2 Florida State defensive tackles are going to play on Sunday. So is Atkinson. So is Rucker. Those are Sunday guys. And those Sunday guys, when they've had opportunities against guys that are not even good on Saturdays, have looked like Sunday guys. And I do think the other thing is that when Carolina is playing against, first of all, quarterbacks that they don't believe really can hurt them that much with their legs, and second of all, against a group of pass catchers that they don't believe present a major problem in the back end, that's when you see Collins get really aggressive. When he believes that he can cover you And he's not just going to give up 70 like he did against JMU because those guys are going to run by you and the quarterback's actually going to put the ball in the right spot. Then he's going to bring mayhem. That's what he does. And if you can't run the football, and neither Virginia and I think that may be the understated part of this, 10 sacks, 7 sacks starts with stopping the run. And, Florida State in this game, their backs, 8 carries, 24 yards, 3 per carry, 4 carries, 19 yards, 4.8 per carry, and then 2 carries, -2 yards, -1 per carry. The real key to this, and this is where Rucker has been enormous, is Carolina's been stopping the run. And they've stopped the quarterback rush as well in the process. That's the biggest difference. With a healthy Kamen Rucker, they stopped the run. And then that's allowed them to get leverage to be able to bring pressure. So all of those factors are contributors. Playing bad offenses and then being able to stop the run, I think, are the two biggest. And Rucker, I think, transforms this front against the run on first down because of what he does. He wrecks shop against offensive tackles, against tight ends, H-backs, and so on. On our day of with Joey Powell, I mentioned how Florida State had gotten dependent on having a dominant defensive end against the run, with 2 years of Jared Verse and then before him, Jermaine Johnson, and that this year they haven't had that, and they've struggled to stop the run as a result with what they like to do schematically. They like to go light box, and last year they'd go light box and they'd give Jared Verse the B gap and the C gap on his side. And Jared Verse would wreck things to the point where you could two gap him from that edge and not pay the price for it. You'd still get a stop for 2 yards. Teams would run straight at it, run at one of those gaps, and Verse would get the tackle or blow it up to the point where somebody else would clean it up. This year, when teams do that, they're getting 6, 7, 20, 48 on those same plays. It's the same thing with Rucker. They can do with Rucker what Florida State did with Jared Verse last year. Now, he's not as good as Jared Verse. We've seen what Verse is in the NFL this year. But I've said for 4 years now that I would pound the table at the NFL level to get Kamen Rucker on my team. There's a reason for that. That guy, people want to talk about the pass rush stuff, but what that guy does to you, or does for you, as a run game end, as a guy who helps set that edge, and as a guy who closes things down in the run game, that makes a big difference. And I think that again, we've seen that the last couple of weeks, and it makes Collins suddenly a much better coordinator.
Yeah, I think that's why people should listen to these shows, because everybody thinks Kamen Rucker's a pass rusher, and he is. It's probably his dominant trait, but Jason's point about the other stuff. But what's left on the defense? I think, like I mentioned, it's just guys fully buying in, everybody's healthy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, Jakeem Harris dropped an interception that might have been a pick six early if I had to be a negative Nelly there on that.
Another drop, by the way.
Yeah. Well, look, Florida State only had 2. Florida State only had 2 or 3 credited. Buck, here's the thing that's, I think, if I remember correctly, last week they had 2 missed tackles against Virginia. This week they had 3, credited for 3, and Huzzy had 1 of them. And interesting enough, Huzzy, Harris, and Lane were the missed tackles. They've shored that stuff up. I mean, they were having 20, 15, 14, and all that stuff. That's huge. I mean, that's differences in ball games here, Buck, and that's another thing that's really stepped up for this team.
Well, one of the problems with North Carolina's tackling early was safeties, and I mean, not being mean about it, but Florida State could hardly get to that level for them to get any tackles.
They got to the second level twice.
So that's one of the things you have to analyze there, is that the safeties look good because pretty much they didn't have to do much in this game. The other piece I would talk about for defensively is that it's rare, I think, to see a team get as far behind as Florida State does and only throw the ball 18 times. I mean, that's a mark of a team that is just beyond hope because, like North Carolina, they're playing JMU. They're getting their butts kicked up and down the field. But Jacoby Criswell, in like his first real start, threw the ball 48 damn times because they thought they had a chance to catch up some, right, by throwing the ball. But Florida State gets behind that far. Nothing changes about their game plan. Okay, I'm 3 touchdowns down. I'm going to hand it off.
They're playing out the string, y'all. They are trying to get out of this season.
I mean, they had 8 completions. In a game they lost by 24 points. Something about that does not compute. It's not what you would see in almost any other situation. You get that far behind, you start slinging the rock. And Florida State, Jason talking about their issues with, quarterbacks that can't really hurt you that bad with their feet, and they don't have that many wide receivers that are, can beat your guys one-on-one.
And they can't pass protect.
That also would be a problem, you would think. So
you put those 4 things together,
and you get 18 attempts in a game you're losing by 24 points. That's
like an unholy trinity of suckage when it comes to offensive football. If you can't reliably throw the football, can't reliably catch the football or get open, and can't block, can't pass block, that right there is that's a trinity of suckage.
You want to know, and I want final thoughts here, and we're going to wrap this one up. But you want to know why PFF troubles me, Jason? Guess what Shaheem Brown's tackling grade was on PFF? Don't look.
Well,
just
I'm just going to say, I'm going to bet it's probably around a 80.
It's 85.2.
Yeah. No,
I guess if you don't try.
That's the thing. He was never actually these were not what we're talking about is when he didn't try to tackle because he took a bad angle to kind of run around so that he never was actually involved in making contact. So this is where those grades can be a little fuzzy because I would say that's a tackle he should have been in on and attempted. But if he didn't try to tackle, can you ding him for missing a tackle?
If nobody's there to hear it, did it fall in the woods? Buck, final thoughts here. Carolina gets to 5-4, another bye week. I think it's another good timed bye week. So now they can focus on football, getting healthy and all, and the last 3 games of the season. But overall thoughts, Buck, what do you think about where Carolina is at this point, going forward, not looking back?
I think they have the blueprint of what they want to be, of who they want to be. They know those things now. And I think possibly we could see some modifications to the game plan sort of that we've seen the last 2 weeks, which has been remarkably similar game plan the last 2 weeks. And I guess a lot of that has to do with Jason's observation that neither of those teams can run very well. What happens when they meet a team that can run the ball? If they meet a team that can run with the ball. Boston College runs the ball fairly decently, I think. So, those are the things that get tweaked down the remainder of this season. But I think at this point, they've put enough on tape the last 3 games, really, for us to understand and for them to understand who they are and as a team, their identity, and what they want to be going forward the rest of this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and we'll just take it from there. One thing I would like to mention before we check out is they have done I guess the ACC officials did a pretty good job this past game. They didn't throw but like 3 flags on UNC and 2 on Florida State, something like that. It was very, very low. They didn't wear out any yellow flags on yesterday's game. So that part of it, you think back when, was it Pitt? I forget, one of those games, they had 16 penalties and 10 in another game. And to go from there down to 2 or 3 a game, they've only had, I think, 16 penalties in the last 4 games. I think they had 5 and 3 and 5 and 3, something like that, in the last 4 games. So they have done a much better job of being disciplined. I think that shows. So, they're coming together down the stretch. So hopefully they won't have the final closing stretch we've seen the last 2 years. And the last thought, actually, I'll throw in, it was good to see backup offensive linemen get in the game as much as they did yesterday. We haven't seen that this season.
Yeah, a
Florida
couple
State's
other
giving
things.
teams a chance to play backups. That's been helpful for a lot of teams. A couple things, though. I will say they did jump off sides a few times that if FSU was well coached up front, they would have gotten 3 or 4 of those.
Those are maddening. Watch the football.
Yeah, and they're maddening on both sides because if a guy jumps into the neutral zone that bad, you got to snap it or you got to move a little bit just to draw the flag. But, they don't do that apparently. And the other thing is, I wonder about this season. I mean, think about how much Rucker's injury has impacted the overall outcome of this season, because I don't think they lose to Duke or Georgia Tech if he's healthy all year. Mm-hmm. And, that Duke game is a game they should have won that football game without question. I mean, they found a way to kind of fritter away that game. And even the Georgia Tech game was a game that they were in the game to play. I mean, they've lost a couple games on the margin, and you change. And I know this is the if my aunt one of those situations.
Yeah.
But
no details necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Sunday morning.
But at the same point, like, you think about how close this season then becomes to a really good season. And something that a lot of people are really excited about. But that sort of middle stretch with JMU and then those 2 close losses sort of cast a pall on that middle part. But if they can recover and handle things down the road, this will still have been a good season for Carolina.
Indeed. Shout out to Congruity. Do this, Matt at congruityhr.com to get your free assessment. Small to mid-sized business. They're wonderful at growing their own business. They certainly can help you grow yours with their technology, their customer service, and their ability to handle the heavy lifting while you grow your business through other ways. Matt at congruityhr.com for that free assessment. Going to get out of here a little bit early. I've got somewhere I need to be in Chapel Hill, no less. That's Buck Sanders, Jason Staples, Carolina 35-11 over Florida State. Another bye week, so no weekly press conferences. But there's some basketball podcast news up. Carolina opens the season tomorrow night, so we'll be full bore into basketball. Stay tuned for press coverage on Tuesday. Maybe a noon dish, maybe a next level on Wednesday. No game plan on Thursday, so we might have to figure out something fun to talk about. Maybe a golf show. Buck, Jason, and the 400-plus people that have been here on a Saturday morning – Sunday morning, excuse me. Everybody stay safe, be healthy, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.